Hello and welcome to another episode of ISO 400. I am your host, Julius Motal. This week I'll be talking with David Brommer, a studio photographer and director of the B&H event space, where he has given many talks on photography, largely on composition and developing a style. And all those videos are available on YouTube, and while they may be long, they are well worth the watch. In this episode, we'll hear about his story, the gallery he ran in the mid-90s in Seattle called Suspect Photography, his work at B&H, and his personal projects. Now, there's a hiccup in the middle of the episode because the internet connection dropped out, which interrupted the Skype call, so the transition will be as smooth as it possibly can be. So we hope you enjoy this episode. As always, our music is provided by Yuki Futami, a New York-based jazz musician, and if you like what we do, please hit subscribe down below and share this with your friends. So sit back and hope you enjoy. Morning. Well, welcome to, I think this is the 6th episode of ISO 400. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this. So, as per my research, you came to photography in the late 80s. After originally you wanted to be an illustrator, but realized photography would be a better fit. You were in Seattle for a time. You ran a gallery called Suspect Photography.
Yes.
And then you moved back to New York and then took up a job at B&H, where you've been ever since, and now you're the director of the B&H event space, where you've given plenty of talks about photography, composition, and everything else. I want to start with the move back to New York, because I had heard you say in another interview that you had a large amount of work in black and white, and you had to start shooting in color. And I'm curious what that switch was like for you.
Brutal. So let's just set a little bit of a time. This is the late 90s, and digital is in the form of digital point and shoots. Olympus had an interesting camera. I believe it was called the C1500, and it was very primitive by today's standards, but it was a ZLR type digital camera, and that was one of the first ones that people started using who weren't out to spend buco bucks on a DCS, one of the heavy duty $20,000 digital cameras. Yeah, it was an interesting time. So film was still prevalent, and I shot black and white film because I love the work in the darkroom. I love that workflow. I think you really get your hands onto the photography when you develop your film and you print it. So I had this big body of black and white work, and my heroes, Avedon. I never saw an Avedon color shot. Have you ever seen Avedon shoot in color?
Not that I know of.
No, I know. He was a black and white guy. So I built up this body of work. It was a fashion documentary on the Gothic industrial grunge side of Seattle, which eventually that project would get very refined and just be goths and freaks and drag queens, omitting some of the grunge stuff that I shot in the Poets. So I brought that work to New York, and I brought it to my favorite magazine at the time, Details magazine. And I'll never forget the art director is looking through the book, and he says, "This is wonderful work. It's great. Where's your color work?" And I said, "Well, I don't have a color book because black and white is, that's real photography. The language of black and white is, the language of photography is black and white." Needless to say, I never got a call back. So I figured out I'd have to develop some color work.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was that hard, but it was I believe that when you do photography and you have a vision, whether your vision should be refined to black and white or to color. So I would try shooting color slide film in one camera, and then I'd have black and white in another camera, and it gets a little confusing to run back and forth between those two. But using colored gels and colored backgrounds, I was able to take my black and white style and colorize it, per se.
And did you look to any specific photographers for influence or inspiration when starting to work on color?
Yeah, I think when I think of color, one of the first things that comes to my mind is Chip Simmons. And Chip Simmons uses a lot of gels over his lights. And he actually did some speed lighting to start off with way back in the early 80s. And he would put these splashes of color, and that worked out. I like that. I like being able to craft my image just with colored lights as opposed to. By the way, I'm a studio photographer. I like to be in the studio creating my
Mm-hmm.
work, so that type of instead of just thinking light, shadow, the quality of light, whether it be harsh or it be soft. Now just make each light have a color. So
Mm-hmm.
working with four lights, even at one point I was working with about six strobes. Each one would have a different color on it, and that color would find its way into the composition.
Yeah. And what's attracted you to studio work over other forms of photography?
All right, I'm going to sound a little cheesy on this one, but I'm going to go
It's
back to.
okay.
I think it's. I can't quite remember the song, but there was a Madonna video, an early
Okay.
Madonna video, and it's one of these '80s, the golden age of MTV videos, where they really tell a story. And in it, Madonna has a Latino boyfriend, but then
Mm-hmm.
she gets discovered by this slick New York City photographer, and he brings her into the studio
Mm-hmm.
and the lights. And I like to control things, and when you're in the studio, you have a ton of control. So
Mm-hmm.
generally, my workflow is I'll put on all the modeling lamps. I'll turn out all the lights in the studio, block the windows, set up the lights, and I like to work my subject in the studio. I like to play music, have a stereo going on,
Mm-hmm.
and get the subject to feel real comfortable. And I think it's fun. You're in your own studio. You're in your own space. You're
Mm-hmm.
controlling everything. When you have a big photo shoot, you've got a crew. And I've had a couple of large photo shoots where there were multiple stylists and wardrobe and assistants
Mm-hmm.
and art directors, and it's like a three-ring circus. And as the lead photographer, you're sort of kind of calling the shots, and it's a blast.
Yeah. So what's it like for you when you're not photographing in the studio? I'd seen your work for Millions March and also your project Battlefield Can't. So what was that like for you moving out of the studio?
Okay, so what happened was New York City is a very tough environment. I had a studio on
Yes.
I had a studio on Broadway. It was a studio share, and I got some good work done in that studio. That was primarily where I discovered my color style.
Mm-hmm.
That work was strictly a little bit of commercial work. I was doing some early uh, catalog work for
Mm-hmm.
websites. The late '90s as e-commerce started to take off, and I was also the photographer for a magazine called Vampire Magazine, and I was photographing once again the scene and the people here in New York City that would wear fangs and go out dancing,
Mm-hmm.
and which color actually lent itself quite well to that, especially the
Yeah.
using purples and reds. Um, so that was great. And then I moved to Brooklyn, and in Brooklyn I had a large studio as a share, two other photographers, and
Mm-hmm.
I think the lesson at this point that I'd like to impart is choose your studio mates very wisely. Uh,
Uh-huh.
yeah, there was one that really he dragged down the studio out
Mm-hmm.
of three, and he hurt. I feel bad was that period of my life. I feel like I I was working, but I wasn't very happy with what was coming out,
Mm-hmm.
and there was sort of a black cloud over the studio. And sometimes we could overcome the black cloud. Otherwise, that was a tough roommate studio mate to have
Sure.
back then. It was brutal. Uh, then I got married. I found this incredible woman that came. I met her at B&H Photo,
Very
and
nice.
she's Italian, and she lived in Milan. And I started traveling in the early 2000s frequently to Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually did a photo shoot in the studio in Milan, which I thought was so cool to be shooting in Milan in the studio. It was a all-girl Kiss tribute band called Kiss Sexy, and so I did a little bit more studio work, but then I lost the studio. 9/11 happened, and rents in Manhattan dropped for a couple of years after 9/11,
Mm-hmm.
and I moved back into Manhattan, and decided I wouldn't have a studio. I would try my doing location stuff, going a lot to Europe. I met Jacques Sturgis, and Jacques Sturgis, the photographer, looked at my work, and he was shocked that I was working with 35 millimeter and 120 cameras.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, but it's a Hasselblad, it's nice
Yeah.
lens. He told me basically to man up and get an 8x10 camera, and 8x10. I did a couple of portraits with the 8x10 camera, but I really
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed taking that places. So I kind of shifted from the studio work to more of a roving photographer and doing projects that were were location based. That was that was all good, and it really kind of changed everything, changed the focus of all my work. And then as I started to get closer with B&H, I started teaching at ICP, teaching at main media workshops. I was one of the three, probably the third person at B&H to really figure out digital photography. And I started doing training for our employees, which would eventually become training for customers. Matter of fact, over 9/11, so New York City is under attack. The country's going crazy. I'm with another B&H employee, and we're doing trainings in for the North Carolina State Highway Patrol. They were going a film workflow to a digital workflow, and B&H had sold them $100,000 worth of gear. They were Fuji pictographies, a lot of Mac computers, and Nikon D1s. They were early adopters, and this was, of course, September 11th, 2001. So that gave me this teaching ability, and started to reinforce that. And then my photography started to turn, instead of projects for clients where it was very difficult to chase down clients, chase down the work, chase down the paychecks afterwards. I just got into teaching photography and really enjoyed that. And that's a lot of the focus of my work has been testing equipment, learning new avenues of composition, new workflows, and then sharing that with people. Now, Battlefield Can't is an interesting project. It's a documentation on the battlefields, World War II, Northern Europe, pretty much specifically following the 101st Airborne Easy Company, which the series Band of Brothers was based off of. What did it was, I believe it was January 2nd of 1999, or maybe in 2000. I'm sorry, time is flying by. Right. But Major Winters, who led the Band of Brothers, passed away at a ripe old age. And when he died, I said, I want to honor him. I want to honor these guys. I want to go and work on this project. So at that point, I took on this Battlefield Can. I went to Normandy for a week and photographed with the 8x10 camera these specific battlefields. And then Battlefield Can't is C-A-N-T, not C-A-N apostrophe T, is a specific language to a group. So what it was I would take poetry or written word from the soldiers who fought there and integrate that with the images. Did a Kickstarter to get me to go do the next two phases of it, which would be going to Bastion in Belgium, where the 101st were encircled by Germans. And then the last part was it was called Operation Market Garden, took place in Holland. So this fall, I hope to go to Holland and pick up that and begin shooting again in those towns, which I'm looking forward to. I've never been to Holland, so that should be wonderful.
Oh, very nice. And with the workshops you teach, are there common things you notice across the students that pass through your workshops, and like, what do you hope to share with them, impart upon them?
Well, the first thing is that I was handling masses of students, and because of running the event space, we attracted definitely more people starting off and getting in, not experienced photographers. And that led, the first thing was compositional nightmares. They'd have these amazing cameras in their hands that can do pretty much everything. And they came from different backgrounds. I come from an art background. I went to college for art and marketing, art and design at Middlesex County College, and that gave me a sensibility for composition. And I think composition in all of us is hardwired to a certain degree, and then to a certain degree we can improve on it and learn good composition. So the first thing was composition classes, and that's where I started a series called Beyond the Rule of Thirds. And I would take a lot of fine art teaching and integrate that in things that aren't discussed so frequently within photography. Positive and negative space isn't. The golden mean is taught, but what really is the golden mean when you learn some of these geometric ideas? I think they sound great in a textbook, but how do you apply them to photography? And also incorporating time and a lot of storytelling within the photograph, which definitely newbies to photography don't really think too much about that. That led to the next series of classes, which was developing photographic style. And I'm quite proud of the ground that I've tread on that, because I definitely, my finding and developing photographic style, a lot of those concepts haven't been talked about before, or haven't been quantified, and I broke it down into 6 segments. And that's been a big focus of my work these days, is finding, developing photographic style. And I feel that with style, composition, photography is technology dependent.
Sure.
So as we're moving away from the DSLR into these mirrorless cameras, and so there's so much technology that our style gets lost. Also, really, I think a big one now I'm really noticing is post. We're living in a world of not Nick,
Yeah.
Nick Silver effects, all their color on one software. There's so much room to imbue a sense of style in your photography now. And I guess in the past that existed too, whether you shot with Velvia, Provia, Tri-X. So I think there's more now, though. And so what we want to see is that we're making good quality images that are well composed, that have a story behind it, maybe project based. And then they have a very specific way they're executed from start to finish.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the focus of my teaching now. We got cut off before, and I just dug up something while we were reconnecting, and I just want to show you it. This is the cover of Vampire magazine, and this was...
is that your shot?
So this is my shot. Yeah, this is this was issue number 1, and I don't remember the year that this is on here. I guess I can look it up. But this is cool. This was shot with a Kodak DCS 290, which was a pretty decent $1,000 digital camera back in the day, and shot with one Lowell light, one Lowell Toda light.
Yeah.
And you know, it was I think that camera was a 2.3 megapixel, and it could be interpolated up to a whopping 3.3 megapixel, which back in 2001 that was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of where I'm at now. Most of my photography is, aside from Battlefield Can't, is treated with. I want to instruct people. I want to take what I've learned and share it. So, you mentioned before about the Black Lives Matter rally. I've enjoyed Chris Gampin of the Photographer.
I know him well. He's my boss.
I worked with Chris, and Chris got me into photo blogging more than anything. He actually I got him to teach classes on blogging platforms at B&H Photo and how to blog, which I think is very difficult to teach. That you have to, you need to be a writer. You need to have good content, and it's a lot going on. But I like now. I'm working on a book that's. At this point, Peach Pit Press is pretty much signed on to it. It's Finding and Developing Photographic Style. And I'm finding just writing the book in general is a little bit difficult because you're writing it without an audience.
Right.
So I'm really incorporating that into my blog. So a lot of the lessons end up on my blog. And it's important to keep shooting. So like that Black Lives Matter, that was a pretty big deal here in America.
I'd covered it too, yeah.
It was a turbulent late fall and winter there.
Yeah.
So as photographers, I think it's our responsibility that even though it's not photographing rallies isn't necessarily, that's not my, being a studio photographer, portrait photographer, it's not my thing, but it's important to engage yourself in the dialogue and be involved and document it. As you develop a large library and you go back into your work, it's amazing to see what you've done. And you don't realize it until time passes. Right. This Thursday night, I'll be at the SVA Theater for the New York Photo Salon. I was asked as one of the 3 photographers, and this is interesting. I'm kind of excited about it because it's not necessarily new work. They want to see the whole body of work, and because I work for B&H Photo, a lot of that vampire stuff and a lot of the fetish fashion. Even though I'm a very specific type of fetish photographer, and I will defend it that fetish work, it's fetish fashion, it's not pornography.
Right.
But working for B&H Photo, I can't show that type of work, so it's nice to go back into the archive. That's not going to happen. But behind me, I've got a pile of my slides out, and that's sort of where I'm just kind of going back into the archive and looking into all that. So that's a blast.
Yeah.
Good to see where you come from.
Oh, definitely. And as far as developing style, how did you develop your own? And with going beyond the rule of thirds, when did you start to break the rules?
I don't break the rules too often. I believe I took a photograph yesterday. in my building there were two. Someone was throwing out two of the little minions, and I grabbed the minions, and as I was walking to get
Oh, I did. I
some
saw that one. Yeah, yeah. The
stuff
the one with the mailbox, right?
with the mailbox,
Yeah.
yeah. So just grab these yellow minions with their blue things, and put them in a blue mailbox, and just made a quick photograph. Uh, I was thinking the photograph is not great.
Hmm.
It's okay. I mean, it's definitely not a great photograph, but I enjoyed carefully composing the image, thinking about the colors that were in it, the way that the mailbox worked. So I don't think I break the rules too often with
Mm.
composition. If you break the rules, you have to have a very strong reason to do it.
Yeah.
Uh, Street photography can, as if the subject's just where you are and where the subject is, time
Hmm.
happens very quickly. You have to be on it. So I think in street photography you can break it, but to me, a good composition will hold up about 70% of the photograph,
Mm.
and then the other 30% will has to be an interesting subject. It has
Yeah.
to have, something speaking about it. How did I find style? It's Style is about consistency,
Hmm.
and I was very inconsistent, as I think most photographers are. You've got this wonderful equipment, you're going out and you're shooting sort of willy nilly. What did it for me was a recipe
Mm.
for film, and it was Kodak Tecpan film, which is not available anymore.
Mm.
It was a specific recipe to develop Kodak Tecpan in Agfa Rodinol with a 1 to 100 dilution with minimum agitation. And once I perfected that 25 ASA film, I mean, think about that. You're ISO 400 on this show, but people
Yeah.
frequently shoot 800, 1600 without blinking an eye.
Right.
25 ASA had a powerful strobes. So it was a way to treat the film, which really was the post processing back then. The paper that you chose to print it on, all that would come into play. And when I started with that consistent film, processing things the same way, developing them the same way, printing them the same way, shooting them the same way, all of a sudden I achieved. I said, "Wow, you can look at my photographs and know that this is a photograph that I took." Now across the street, there's Dennis who's shooting, and he looks dramatically different. That's important.
Yeah.
Identify your style, shoot the same way, and stick with it.
Hmm. Definitely. And as far as the suspect photography gallery in Seattle goes, what was it like running a gallery?
Those were the halcyon days. um, well, a couple of things I can say about galleries. First off, there was a number of photo galleries in Seattle at the time.
Hmm.
Uh, there was only two that were really dedicated to photography in Seattle, and that was Benham, which was on First Avenue, and then there was a G. Gibson Gallery, which actually eventually would move onto my floor. They were across the street. They moved
Hmm.
onto my floor at 122 South Jackson. Benham was one of the first galleries I walked into the first week I was exploring the new city I lived in. Benham
Hmm.
was run by two women, and it had a wonderful sensibility, a wonderful aesthetic. They had a show up by a Seattle photographer named Patricia Ridenauer, and Patricia did a series called Goddesses, and they were fantasy portraits of women shot in black and white, hand colored, and then put in really nice frames that matched the goddess look of the photograph. So these are like women in pools of water, women in flowers and woods, and they
Hmm.
reflected different goddesses. And because I'm pagan, of course, I absolutely loved it.
Hmm.
Nothing's better than a goddess. So Patricia Ridenauer actually gave me a little bit of a jolt. Again, it was a strong sense of style. It was a full-on project where I sort of came from a little bit of a commercial background in
Hmm.
photography before then. So I had this beautiful studio in Pioneer Square, the old part of town, and there was a back doorway. It was sort of like an emergency exit, and it there was the front door to the building, which was on South Jackson, but this back door opened up onto Occidental. Occidental is a
Hmm.
cobblestone, traffic-free pedestrian zone, where there's a lot of galleries and nice shops. And I said, wow, if I open up this door, it pretty much leads right to my second floor, 1,000-foot square gallery studio space.
Hmm.
I'll have on first Thursdays of every month, I'll have about 400, 800 people pretty much could walk through my place. What a great marketing venture. So I opened up the gallery. The gallery would work 4 days a week, and then it was a shooting studio 3 days a week, and I also shot at night.
Hmm.
All the backdrops, the seamless was suspended from the ceiling, very high ceiling, with pulleys. So I could very easily convert the place into a studio. I put casters on all my light stands, so I could just wheel the light stands over. I marked my floor, my hardwood floor, with a couple pieces of gaff tape, so I knew where the lights would always go. And pretty much I could set up that studio in about 10 minutes, which
Wow.
was pretty well, maybe 12 minutes.
Okay.
But I could set it up for shooting quite quickly. So I would convert it, and I would shoot the local personalities in Seattle, and it was a wonderful time. And having the gallery, the exhibitions, I used Benham Gallery as a role model and as a template, basically. And whatever Marita Holdaway did at Benham, I would do with a little scaled down version. I called my gallery and a few other galleries that were in the area Maverick galleries. And to me, a Maverick gallery is a gallery that's run by the artist and is still an artist. If you want to be a serious gallery, I mean, you really want to pay your rent, make your dollars with a gallery, that requires an amazing commitment, a wonderful contact list, and it takes years to build up that business. Suspect Photography went for 3 years. It was a great 3 years. We did some wonderful shows that were conscious, that were important, especially for that time.
Yeah.
Because the '90s was sort of a golden time. It was a calm before the storm, so to speak. We came off of our first war in Iraq quite successful, and it was pretty easy. We won that war with minimum casualties. We had a new president who played the saxophone and was really cool.
Yeah.
You'd have to have quite a personality to not like Bill Clinton in the '90s. Plus, the internet was born basically around 95, 96. We really started to hear it, and it was like Seattle was a pioneer town, and the world was very pioneer at that point. We were covering new ground. We were discovering cyberspace. The gallery was wonderful. It was a blast. I mean, there are no rules to a gallery. That's one thing I discovered. There is no school for gallery. You follow your heart. You do what you do. You make sure that you recruit good artists, and you just go forward with it.
Yeah. So now with working at B&H, you've got a lot of your own personal projects. You talk in a bunch of places. Photography is your life. And I imagine there are times when you hit creative dry spells. We all do. How do you, if you've had them, how do you push through them?
How do you push through a creative dry spell? The first thing that I advocate, I'm going to reach for one up here, is maintaining a little black book, which I talk about frequently. And the little black book really keeps your focus on your projects and what you're doing. So set a goal, set something that you want to do, write it all out. I actually have a document that I'm working for in the book, and it's a project development sheet. And this sheet you basically you fill out, and it has what you want to say, expenses, budgets, how you plan on executing it. And I believe that there's a great commitment to photography. So you set up your project and you simply you go for it. I don't really have creative lulls anymore because it's I've had some big projects that are going to take a long time to complete, and that's pretty much it. For an example, one of the elements to the book, The Finding Developing Photographic Style, is that I'm writing about every photographic genre that's out there. Now, there aren't so many, and I'm doing the genre major and the genre minor. So let's say outdoor photography, nature photography, landscape falls in with that, macro falls in with that. Wildlife is a genre all of itself, but it's underneath that outdoor photography genre major. So there's a lot of work to be done. If you do get bored or find yourself in a lull, I would say two things. Go back to your project development book, go back to that little black book and get yourself back on target. If you can't travel to Europe to photograph in battlefields, then you go to Gettysburg, go to Pennsylvania. I mean, there are battlefields that are nearby, and that keeps your pencil sharpened and keeps you on target. Even though Battlefield Camp specifically is about Northern European battlefields of World War II, why can't I go and practice the same thing in Gettysburg?
Yeah.
I mean, a ton of history there. So that'll help you keep going along. And then the other thing, and this is, I don't want to sound like a B&H salesman on this one,
No
but
worries.
getting, okay, getting yourself a new camera, a new piece of gear, which realistically, you probably, in the digital world, you'll find yourself buying a new camera, conservatively saying, every 3 years.
Mm.
Compelling technology will happen then. Like now, I think we're in the age of, we've got back to the megapixel race that stopped for a couple of years.
Yep.
Because in all reality, 18 to 24 megapixels is good enough. However, now we're in the 36 to 50 megapixels, so the race is back on. But a big one is Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi being built into the camera, lots of connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
I feel disappointed that a lot of photography is moving away from the print and it's going on to Instagram, which I think in the end it will hurt photography in terms of its raw quality. The actual craft of photography, it diminishes it slightly to go to this Instagram world. However, the bonus is that more people than ever are seeing work. When could you ever snap a picture and within 24 hours 50,000 people get their eyeballs on that picture?
Yeah.
It's never happened before in the history of photography.
Yeah. Are we? What's good? Are we good on time? Or I know you may have to go.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, we're still good. So how? I mean, how do we kind of get photography back to the print to kind of save it from, to save it from where it may be going?
That's a great question, and I've asked myself this one frequently a couple of years ago. I do, luckily, because of B&H in the event space, I wield some power as an influencer, and I reinforce the print in the classes. I make sure that we have Epson frequently coming in, Canon coming in, talking about their printers, and we have something called portfolio development. And what we do is we're in the second year of it now, and the program runs 1 year. And what portfolio development is that you go through a curated list of 12 classes in a 6-month period, and there's a large battery of critiques that happen. There's a total of 6 critiques. In the end, you have to provide 3 prints on 13 by 19 paper. Basically, it's around 11 by 14 size on 13 by 19 paper. And it gets reviewed by Soho Photo. And then we actually have a show for the event space portfolio developers at Soho Photo. So what we can do to reinforce the print is all of us as instructors have to keep talking about the print. We love Ben Lowy. Ben Lowy is he's a wonderful photographer, journalist. He's really taken Instagram and Instagram photography to a new level. He was the first guy to have the iPhone, a photograph from an iPhone on the cover of Time magazine.
Yeah.
So I remember the first one I saw in New York Times. I remember just looking at that cover saying, they let an iPhone onto the cover of the New York Times. So if Ben Lowy is known for his Instagram work and is a big guy, Ben Lowy will have exhibitions, and those exhibitions will be print. So we need to learn how to print. No matter what, the print can't go away. If you want to reach a certain level, you're going to have to do a print. So what we can do is we can reinforce it. We can talk about the print more. We can show prints. I do portfolio reviews, and I don't want to see you come in with an iPad or a laptop and do a portfolio review. I want to see a portfolio. I want to see a real book of images so that you can show me what you're show pictures. For me, a book, a print-on-demand book, if it's a blurb book or an A&I book, that's still printing.
Yeah.
And it has a tactile feel when you hold it in your hands, whether you choose a beautiful Cot 320 paper or a Canson paper or Epson Premium Luster or a blurb book, you're still holding something physical in your hands. Something is lost when you're working just with looking at images on a phone. It's not the same thing. You also look at the images very quickly on a digital one. I think you stand in front of a print, you absorb a little bit more.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's something I need to work on for my own stuff. And things are a lot more expensive here in Turkey with import taxes. So maybe when I get back to New York or I find a cheap printer here. So this is something. Oh no, actually, before I get to that question, what was it like working on the 10 hours walking in New York City as a goth video? I had seen it. I know you're primarily a stills guy, and this was kind of a new, I think at least a new experience for you. So, what was that process like? What did you learn?
Well, I'm gifted that I work with a lot of prominent photographers and videographers
This is
out there.
true.
I'm on first name basis with a lot of great creatives: Vincent Laforet, Shane Hulbert. These guys, they influenced me a little bit. Not that 10 hours walking was anything quite like what they do. So that was a blast because I got back to my roots
Mm,
working with a freak. And when I say freak, I mean that only with the endearing
of course.
term. Uh, I was I went out to a goth bar and I met some old friends that were working at the bar and were still DJing. And
Mm,
they brought DJ Paradox up to me and very proudly showed off this girl and really reminded me of back in the day.
yeah.
She had the Manson. She actually did double contacts, which
Whoa.
I've never seen anyone do good doubles. She had the corset and the whole deal. And I put her in the back of my mind and said to myself, I'd like to work with her at some point. About 9 months later, the 10 hours walking as a New York City as a woman came out, and I was like, okay, this is it. I'm gonna do this. I'm
Yeah.
gonna learn video, and it was a blast to work with the Sony RX10, script it, write it, shoot it, and then edit it. Editing was it was my first time working with Premiere,
Mm,
and I think as a still photographer, and many people will agree with me on this, we could be great at Photoshop, we could build websites, we could do all that, we could play around with our still
yeah.
photography, scanning and all that. But man, when it came down to Premiere, that was like pulling my own teeth.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
You'll be editing this video. I'll
I will.
turn on and experiencing that. Uh, there are hurdles in life and in creativity, and when you jump the hurdle and you learn a new technique and you do something, you you grow in stature
Hmm.
across the board. So, I wanted to do some type of a video project, and this was perfect. It was short, it was sweet. I could
Hmm.
get pretty much instantaneous results. It was shot on a Sunday. It was uploaded the following Thursday, so it was really just jumping on it, editing it. It was also time sensitive because when
Mm,
you want to do a viral video, there are circumstances in the world that will make your video more popular. So I had to jump on it quickly,
yeah.
and I enjoyed it thoroughly. Every ounce of it was a blast. Uploading it, and then it's now. I just checked it this morning. It's at almost 400,000 views,
Very nice.
and the comments are atrocious. The YouTube troll community is. I learned a lot about that, but that also keeps you going. When you have an audience, when you
Mm,
have 400,000 views. So I'm working out with Paradox now. What we're going to do next together. I like to work with when I work with models. I use them for about 2-3 years. They become my muses, and I like to work specifically with them.
hmm.
And she was a blast to work with. It was fun. It was a very cold, uncharacteristically cold day,
Yeah.
and she was a super trooper and went through it. So it was
Yeah.
great.
So there is more video in your future. Do you think?
So this is sort of what I'm thinking. This is the first time I've actually spoke about this, but I realize that a lot of the teaching is a long commitment. They're long videos, and YouTube likes a short video. So the next step I think I may do is take some of my lessons and
Hmm.
make little 2-minute illustrations of some of my lessons,
Hmm.
and use Paradox to be the actors inside those lessons and illustrate them. And who knows? They might be really cool. They may not be. Um, Otherwise, I'm really racking my mind for the next little video project, and I got a couple of ideas, and I think I'll stick with Paradox and using the goth style because
Hmm.
that's what I'm known for. That's what I do, and as you know, there's many videos out there on YouTube of photographers teaching photography or doing things.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick with what I know best. I'm going to talk about photography, and I'm going to use a freak to illustrate those points. A
Fair.
cute freak.
Good. Got it. So this is a question I ask every photographer at the end of these interviews. And given that you're experienced in a number of different genres of photography, what's one piece of advice you would give to someone who's thinking of being a studio photographer and someone who's looking to get into fetish fashion photography?
Okay, so first thing for a studio photographer, is that learn strobe light.
Mm-hmm.
Continuous light. Continuous light is just it's. I'm going to say it's for amateurs.
Mm-hmm.
Continuous light. It's easy to do. It's you don't get the same results that you get with true strobe photography.
Mm-hmm.
I would say what you should do is you should buy a couple of monolights,
Mm-hmm.
and when you get into a monolight, you can buy them one at a time. Good light starts at 3 lights. Better light starts at 4 lights.
Mm-hmm.
So when you work with a monolight, you can buy monolights as you need them. So as you slowly become more skilled in studio photography, you can add lights. So that's what I have to say about studio photography. The next one is as far as fetish fashion. I don't necessarily recommend getting into fetish fashion.
Mm-hmm.
There's a goth performer. His name is Voltaire, and one time over drinks at a bar, Voltaire said that he hit the Gothic glass ceiling,
Huh.
and basically, goth is a subculture. You can only go so big in it. Peter Murphy and Susie Sue from Susie and the Banshees. Peter Murphy was the lead singer of Bauhaus. They took goth about as high as it could possibly go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as a photographer working in that genre, it's you can only go so far with it. Understand that you do have a ceiling. You're
Mm-hmm.
never going to become an incredibly successful doing that. Fetish photography, it has a ceiling as well. And we had a wake up call with there's a photographer named Eric Kroll. And Eric Kroll, to me, multiple books, Taschen books, great photographer. And Eric Kroll, he hit a glass ceiling with it. A conversation a long time ago. I haven't spoken with him in over a decade, so I hope he's doing well. But at the time, he was living in San Francisco, and he was having a rough financial time. And for me to see a photographer that has Taschen books out there and is very well known within
Yeah.
this genre, yet he's having a tough financial time, what's up with that?
Yeah.
Where wedding photographers are doing really well. So if you want to get into something like this, fetish photography is very psychological. It's very in your head.
Mm-hmm.
So tread carefully and just manage your expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Fetish photography, a photographer I used to show at Suspect Photography, Michael Donnell, he said, fetish photography, the prints end up in the bathroom.
Hmm.
Someone buys my prints, they end up in the bathroom. And that's sort of where that, will people put out pictures fetish? But will you have photographs of women with balls in their mouths and men on all fours in rubber suits in a living room? You're gonna have to be pretty cool and progressive to have that right out there.
Yeah.
So understand your market. It's a tough market.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This has been a fantastic interview, and great to hear from you.
Thank you, Jules.
Yeah.
It's very much. Thank you. It was a pleasure. And
thanks so much for watching. This has been ISO 400. If you'd like to find out more about David Brommer's work, you can check out suspectphotography.com, or you can go to the B&H YouTube channel. All of those links will be available down below. Again, if you like what we do, please hit subscribe and share this with your friends. Thanks so much, and see you next week.